Hi all, Lord Rho here, and today we continue our look at the Razing of Monarchia with part 2 of our series, The Emperor Warns Lorgar. So if you haven't checked out the first one yet, then go back and watch that before continuing on with this upload. As usual, spoiler warning to begin. Today we are covering events from the Horus Heresy novel, The First Heretic, and I really recommend you read the book for yourself first, as that's how you get the most enjoyment out of the lore for yourself. Not only that, but we help to support Games Workshop and the Great Black Library, as without them, well, we wouldn't have this amazing lore that we all know and love, and we wouldn't be here discussing it. But with that said, let's jump straight in. The displacement of air resulted in a bang not far from a sonic boom. But that wasn't what sent Argyll Tau reeling. He'd seen teleportation technology used before, had travelled via such rare means himself, but the noise was filtered to tolerable levels by his helm's perceptive systems. And it wasn't the light of a teleport flare that forced him to avert his eyes. This too would have been compensated for by his armour's internal sensors, dimming his eye lenses immediately. But he was blind. Blinded by gold, burning like molten metal. The Vox shrieked with thousands of his brothers voicing the same malady, but the reports from his brethren were dull, half lost in an assault of noise that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a fault with the Vox, it was in his head. A crashing of waves loud enough to throw off his balance. Blind and almost deafened, Argyll Tau felt his bolter slip from his grip. It took all of his strength to remain standing. Lorgar Aurelian saw none of this. No blinding golden light, no deafening psychic roar. He saw 6 figures standing in unity, 5 of whom he did not recognise, and 1 he did. Behind them the Ultramarines, not afflicted as his warriors were, on their knees in an orderly display. Only Guilliman and the Sigillite remained standing. Lorgar looked back to the 6, the 5 ringed the familiar figure, and though the Primarch did not know their name, he knew their creed. Archingly elaborate armour of rich gold, cloaks of royal scarlet draped from their shoulders, long halberds topped by weighty silver blades, gripped in hands that would never tremble. Custodians, the Emperor's guardians. Lorgar looked to the 6th figure, who was just a man. Despite the vigour of youth, age lines showed time's tracks across features that were both stern and gentle all at once. The man's appearance depended entirely on which facet of his face one focused upon. He was a tired, ageing man, a heroic statue immortalised in life's prime. He was a young, grimacing warlord with cold eyes, and a confused elder on the edge of weeping. Lorgar focused on those eyes now, seeing the warmth of love within the benevolence of trust. The man blinked slowly, and as his eyes opened again, they were cold, with the frigid touch of disappointment blending into the ice of disgust. "Lorgar," the man said. His voice was quiet but strong, lost in the indecipherable vista between hatred and kindness. "Father," Lorgar said, to the Emperor of mankind. I like we get Lorgar's view of the Emperor here. He sees just a man. All the different faces of the Emperor, but still, just a man. And that he sees the warmth of love in his father's eyes. Then the disappointment as the Emperor focuses on the reason he's here. There's very few things in life that cut you as much as someone who loves you looking at you with disappointment in their eyes. I think most people have experienced that once in their lifetime, and you know that feeling. How must Lorgar feel? It must be magnified by 1,000. This is the Emperor of mankind looking at him like that. There's no one more important to the Primarchs than their father. Sight returned, banishing the grotesque feeling of helplessness. Such emotion was anathema, prickling at Argyll Tau's skin with 1,000 insect legs. He managed to look through the dimmed visor, seeing a towering figure deep in a corona of agonizing white light. Around the figure, cloaked and gold-armoured warriors hefted unique spears with practiced ease. Each one was the size of an Astartes, and no Astartes could fail to recognise them. Custodes, he managed to speak through gritted teeth at the light's intensity. It's, Zathan stammered. It's the... I know who it is, Argel Tau exhaled, the words through clenched teeth. And that's when the voice hit him. Hit them all, in a wave of invisible force. Kneel. It whispered with the power of a hammer to the forehead. There was no resisting. Muscles ached instantly. No matter that many hearts fought to not obey, Argel Tau was one of them. This was not fealty, nor worship, nor service. This was slavery, and his instincts rebelled at the enforced devotion even as he obeyed it. 100,000 word-bearers kneeled in the dust of the perfect city, rendered prone by imperial decree. A legion was on its knees. Lorgar looked over his shoulder, taking in the seascape of his kneeling warriors. Fire flickered in his eyes. When he returned his gaze to the Emperor, "Father," Lorgar began, but the man shook his head. "Kneel," he said. His timeless face was framed by dark hair, the same colour as Lorgar's facial stubble. Like father, like son. "What?" the Primarch asked. He looked past the Emperor to Guilliman, straight-backed and proud. When he returned his gaze to his father, he wiped his eyes with his soft fingertips, as if to clear some lingering thought. "Father?" "Kneel, Lorgar." The Emperor making Lorgar kneel here, as an example to his legion perhaps, or to make Lorgar realise his failure. It's important to note the Emperor is not using his power to make Lorgar kneel. He's merely telling him. And what about the power of the Emperor as well? He's making 100,000 Astartes kneel before him, effortlessly. 100,000, an entire legion. Can you imagine if the Emperor was able to defend the walls of Terra instead of being stuck on that throne? The whole defence of Terra might have been a hell of a lot easier, that's for sure. Argel Tau watched with clenched teeth as Lorgar lowered himself to one knee. His first instincts were fading now, replaced by reason and the comfort of faith. It was only right to kneel before the God Emperor. He willed his hearts to slow, despite the implied insult of his deity impelling him to abase himself. The rebellious anger resurfaced in a stinging adrenal flood only a moment later, as he watched the Ultramarines rise to their feet at Guilliman's command. He could see them watching, feel their eyes boring into him as he knelt before them. One legion's warriors stood in the Emperor's presence with a Primarch's blessing, while another was on its knees in the bones of a dead city. It was a moment that cast a dozen reflections, for the word-bearers had mirrored this action many times before, under alien skies. Legions laying claim to less discipline or grace might beat their chests and howl at the moon upon achieving compliance. But among the sons of Lorgar, victory was to be cherished in reverence and dignity. The triumphant warriors would kneel in the heart of the fallen city and heed the words of their chaplains. The rite of remembrance, a time to recall the sacrifices of lost brothers and reflect upon one's place in the word. Argel Tau felt sweat painting cold trails down his temples. Trembling threatened to take hold as his traitorous muscles bunched, locking in painful cramps. The joints of his armour thrummed with unreleased strength, forcing him to endure this perversion of the Legion's most sacred ritual. The voice returned. This time, it gave answer that the 17th Legion so craved. Lorgar looked into his father's unknowable face as the Emperor spoke. "You are a general, my son, not a high priest. You were created for war, for conquest, to reunite the human race under the aegis of truth. Note the Emperor calling him son here. You are a general, my son. Yes, you were created for war, but you're my son. You're not a tool. I know. The Emperor closed his eyes, and an image of Monarchia as it had been, bright and glorious, filled Lorgar's mind. This is worship, the Emperor said. This is a poison to truth. You speak of me as a god, and forge worlds that suffer under the one lie that has brought humanity to the edge of extinction time and time again. The people are joyous. The people are deceived. The people will burn when their faith is proven false. My worlds are loyal. Lorgar was no longer kneeling. He rose to his feet, his voice rising with him. My legion shapes the most fiercely loyal worlds in your Imperium. It is not my Imperium. The words thudded into Argel Tau's mind like a stream of bolter shells. For a brief, hateful moment, he glanced at his retinal display to check his life signs. He was certain he was dying, and had he not already been on his knees, he would have fallen to them now. It is the Imperium of man, the empire of humanity, enlightened and saved by the truth. He heard Lorgar's reply this time. I speak no lies. You are a god. Lorgar, I will not be silenced, because you do not like the melody of one single word. In your grip, 1,000 worlds turn. By your will, 1,000,000 vessels sail the void. You are immortal, undying, seeing all and knowing all that transpires across creation. Father, you are a god in all but name. All that remains is to confess to it. Lorgar. The voice came with a wall of pressure now, dense and all too tactile. It pounded into Argel Tau like a miasma of engine wash, heating his armour and throwing him to the ground. Around him, he could see his brothers sent sprawling, their armour skidding across the dust. Defiant in the cyclone of unseen energy, scrolls of scripture ripping from his armour, Lorgar raised his hand to point at his father. You are a god. Say the words and end the lie. The Emperor shook his head. Not in defeat, but calm defiance. You are blind, my son. You cling to ancient perceptions and endanger us all with them. Let this end, Lorgar. Let this end with you heeding my words. The psychic wind died with a pearl of thunder. Lorgar stood where he was, trembling for reasons his warriors couldn't discern. Blood ran from one ear, running in a slow trail down his tattooed neck. I am listening, father, he said. Okay, it's safe to say the blood trickle from Lorgar's ear is the effects of the Emperor's psychic shout. To cut off Lorgar's preaching, seeing as it sent the whole force of the word-bearers tumbling into dust, it must have been extremely hard for Lorgar to stand before it. But he did, because he is utterly convinced at this moment in time that his father is a god. And let's be honest here, it's hard not to look upon the Emperor that way. He has all these unbelievable powers, guiding the Astronomicon the entire time he's doing everything else in the Empire, communicating across worlds, commanding legions with just a thought. You know, you can understand why Lorgar feels the way he does, despite this imperial truth. The 7th captain hauled himself back to his feet, stumbling once and righting himself before his armour's stabilizers needed to compensate. He was one of the first word-bearers to rise. The others still struggled, shivering on hands and knees, all were locked in muscle spasms, their twitching limbs disturbing the dust. Argel Tau helped Zathan up, receiving a grunt of thanks. Word-bearers, hear me well. You, among all my legions, are guilty of failure. You number more warriors than any other, excepting the 13th. Yet your conquests are the slowest, and your victories ring hollow. It hurt too much to look directly at the figure of white gold light, haloed by coruscating psychic fire, telling them with words of thunder that all of their lives had been wasted. You linger on compliant worlds for years after final victory, driving the populace into worship of false faith, seeding cults of the naive and the deceived, erecting monuments to lies. All you have done in the Great Crusade is for naught. While all others succeed and bring prosperity to the Imperium, you alone have failed me. Lorgar stepped back from the figure, only now raising his arms to ward off its radiance. Wage war as you were created to do. Serve the Imperium as you were born to do. Take with you the lesson learned here this day. You kneel in the ruination found at the end of a false path. Let this be your legion's rebirth. The Primarch managed a weak father, but it was spoken to emptiness. Another sonic boom of displacing air heralded the Emperor's return to orbit. Extremely blunt and to the point from the Emperor there. Everything you have done in the Crusade is for naught. You alone have failed me. Ouch. And it seems harsh, but technically, he's right. If the word bearers are leaving worlds behind that worship the Emperor, then that is going against the entire point of the Great Crusade. But still, what a way to do it. You can literally see the resentment being implanted in the word bearers here. To do it at all is enough, but even worse in front of another legion of Astartes, and the perceived high and mighty Ultramarines out of all of them. Why did the Emperor choose Guilliman? Why not a Primarch who was closer to Lorgar perhaps? Like Magnus, for example. Maybe mere practicality reasons, perhaps Guilliman was the closest? Or was it a very specific reason to show him the example of what he should be, what his legion should be? We'll never know, but you have to wonder if it would have been any different with a different Primarch. A more relatable brother such as Sanguinius or Vulcan, or even Horus. And Lorgar's dedication standing in front of the Emperor amidst the psychic display. He was so committed to his beliefs. But what did you guys think? Was the Emperor in the right here? Or was his intention right, but his execution wrong? How do you think he should have gone about it? And what about his power? Making the word bearers kneel with just a thought. Man, I love these moments of the Emperor's power. But leave a comment down below with your thoughts to let me know. As always, a huge thank you to all of my subscribers. I really appreciate all of your support. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. Bit of a mouthful there. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you guys again real soon.